Hey guys, tonight we slip back into a time when thrones could be made of anything, even people. You're standing on the hot, reddish clay of 17th century Angola, sweat gathering at your collar, every muscle tense. You've just marched hours through the bush, swatting flies and wondering if that sound behind you was a snake or just your own nerves. Portuguese officers are fidgeting beside you, fanning themselves with their feathered hats, mumbling in tight circles. You all arrived on time. You all followed orders. And yet, the Queen is nowhere to be seen. You've probably had to wait for someone important before. Maybe a doctor, a boss, or a teacher who strolled in late with coffee and a half-hearted apology. But you've never waited like this, because Queen Nzinga doesn't just run late. She orchestrates lateness. And tonight, she's staging her grandest delay yet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your feet ache. The ground's been cleared and swept. Your surroundings unusually pristine. No birds, no wind, just waiting. It's been hours since the sun started descending behind those scorched hills, and just as you're about to whisper a complaint, a hush silences even the flies. You hear the shuffle of footsteps, drums, low, steady, like a heartbeat with ambition. A line of women in robes the color of wet embers stride forward. One of them carries a stool, another a red parasol, but the Queen is still not among them. You glance at the Portuguese envoy. He's soaked in sweat, his white ruffles stained brown with dust. He's muttering now. They were promised a meeting, a treaty, a surrender even. Instead, they got shade and silence. And then, finally, she arrives, not walking, not riding, carried on a human throne. Two men crouch like furniture beneath her, faces expressionless, backs straight. Nzinga lounges above them like a jaguar on a branch, eyes half-lidded, fan fluttering in one hand. Around her, guards form a living wall, shields shimmering with bronze. You take a slow breath. This isn't just late. This is tactical. This is a statement. Nzinga steps down, graceful, slow. The kind of slow that makes everyone else rush inside. She's tall, draped in layers of cloth embroidered with beads and gold. Her headdress sparkles like starlight caught in a net. The scent of musk and ash clings to her like armor. And then she speaks, not to the Portuguese, not to her own guards, to you, or at least to someone like you, a witness. This is how you meet invaders, she says, on your own time. And just like that, your spine straightens. because you realize this woman isn't just a queen, she's a conductor, and time is her orchestra. Mainstream historical accounts agree that Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba was a master of diplomatic theater. In 1622, when she met with Portuguese representatives to negotiate peace, she famously refused to sit on the floor, as was customarily forced upon African leaders in European negotiations. Instead, she ordered one of her own attendants to serve as her chair, immediately inverting the power dynamic. That detail is documented by both Portuguese records and African oral traditions. But there's a fringe version of that story too, one whispered in moonlit villages and passed down like a sacred riddle. In that version, the attendant wasn't just a stool, he was a former enemy, or a captured noble, or maybe her own cousin. The point isn't who he was. The point is that Nzinga chose to turn him into furniture. Historians still argue whether this version is metaphor, propaganda, or simply a storytelling flourish designed to burn her image into the minds of every colonial observer. And burn it did. You watch as Nzinga sits. Her voice cuts through the humid air like a blade dipped in honey. She makes no apologies for her lateness. She offers no excuses. She speaks as though time has bowed to her, not the other way around. You glance again at the Portuguese delegation. Some of them stare at the ground, others at her, their expressions somewhere between fear and awe. They thought they were walking into a meeting. She made it a coronation. And just when you think she's finished, she leans in, just slightly. I was not late, she says. I was simply deciding whether you were worth my presence. You blink. Well, that's one way to negotiate. The meeting ends without bloodshed, but without surrender either. The Portuguese leave, confused, rattled. And you follow Nzinga back to her camp, footsteps light on the red clay. Because now you're curious. How many times has she done this? How often does she twist the clock like a snake around her wrist? As the campfire crackles and stars settle into their velvet beds, you lie back on the grass and wonder something dangerous. If power is perception and perception is timing, then maybe lateness isn't rudeness. Maybe it's rebellion, one that Nzinga, queen of patience and pageantry, perfected to an art. The sun rises, and you're drawn back into Nzinga's world. But today, you're more than just a witness. You're in the thick of it, part of the court, surrounded by the incessant hum of strategies and whispers. The day begins with tensions already in the air. After all, when you are late on purpose, every second is filled with deliberate silence. Nzinga's lateness, far from being a simple matter of habit, is a strategic weapon. You watch as she weaves her entrances with precision, each delay calculated not only to frustrate her enemies, but to leave them in a permanent state of uncertainty. This isn't the casual tardiness of someone who's just too busy to be on time. No, Nzinga uses every delay as an opportunity to shape the flow of power. Imagine this. You're in a royal courtyard where the air is thick with the smell of roasted meats and incense. Envoys from various tribes and foreign kingdoms have gathered to meet with the queen. They've all come at her invitation, each bringing promises of alliances, trade, or perhaps even submission. But none of them expect the same thing. They assume they'll be the ones dictating terms. But as the clock ticks, Nzinga remains absent. The courtiers begin to shuffle their feet. The envoys shift from foot to foot, and those who'd normally command attention begin to look like children trying to impress a teacher. The power dynamic begins to shift before the meeting even starts. Historians agree that this psychological warfare wasn't just a tactic, it was Nzinga's signature move. She didn't merely refuse to conform to the colonial power's demands. She dismantled their expectations entirely. And the most brilliant part of it, every delay brought with it a deeper message. The longer she kept her guests waiting, the more fragile their control seemed. This was power in its most distilled form, being in control of when and how others could act. But there's more than just that. Nzinga's lateness wasn't a mere act of defiance. It was calculated to maximize her leverage. The Portuguese, for instance, found themselves frustrated by her delays to the point of nervous breakdowns. The longer they had to wait, the more desperate they became for her approval. Every minute stretched out, and with it, her dominance solidified. She knew exactly what they wanted: an answer, a gesture, anything that might signal submission. But they got none of it. Historians still debate whether Nzinga's delay tactics were an inherent part of her personality or a clever response to the Portuguese's constant pressure. While some view her as naturally aloof, others see her as a master strategist, honing her ability to keep her adversaries waiting just long enough to feel out of control. It's not just political, it's personal. Nzinga's decisions about how and when to engage weren't random, they were psychological. You begin to see it now in the way she controls the ebb and flow of power with her every move. The Portuguese delegation, for example, had been counting on a treaty. They'd arrived early, hoping to catch her in a more submissive mood. But instead, they were kept waiting for hours, and it wasn't a simple matter of showing up late. Nzinga made her absence its own statement. Her silence echoed louder than any words could. She made the Portuguese wait, knowing they would stew. Every minute that ticked by added pressure. Every glance at their watches made the clock her ally. By the time she appeared, their nerves were frayed, their composure gone, and she hadn't even begun the meeting yet. You can't help but marvel at how simple, how elegant it all is. Lateness isn't something passive. It's not about losing control or being thoughtless. Nzinga had turned it into an art form, something that left her enemies questioning everything they thought they knew. And the more you watch, the more you understand. Control of time is the ultimate power. Nzinga's use of delays was even more profound when it came to military strategy. In battle, timing is everything. But she knew that sometimes it's not about when you strike, it's about when you don't. By delaying her decisions, delaying her responses, she kept her enemies constantly on edge, always guessing. Every time they thought they had her cornered, she shifted her position, never giving them the satisfaction of certainty. This game of control played out not just in negotiations, but in the very way she fought. When word spread of an incoming Portuguese force, instead of responding immediately, Nzinga often waited. She delayed her tactics, allowing her enemies to make their move first. And when they did, they often found themselves unprepared for the sudden shift in her strategy. In this way, lateness wasn't just a tool for diplomatic negotiation. It was a weapon on the battlefield as well. But it wasn't just the Portuguese she played this game with. Every kingdom, every tribal leader who thought they could outmaneuver her was made to wait. Even the ambitious local rulers learned that under Nzinga's reign, the clock was always on her side. And while she'd occasionally surprise them with sudden moves, her most profound victories came when they found themselves simply waiting for her to act. They waited because they knew they had no other choice. It's not hard to imagine how frustrating this could be for those who were used to acting quickly, to securing immediate answers and signing swift treaties. The Portuguese, who expected everything to run on their timetable, couldn't fathom why she would make them wait. And yet, in those very minutes of impatience, Nzinga's power grew. Historians still argue whether this habit of keeping people on edge was just a reflection of her disdain for Portuguese arrogance, or whether it was a strategic brilliance to assert her authority. Perhaps it was a little of both. But one thing is for sure. When Nzinga was late, everyone knew it was intentional, and every minute that ticked by only made her more powerful. There's a quiet hum that fills the air as you sit in the shadows of Nzinga's palace. The heat is stifling, and the day drips slowly, almost languidly, as though the very world is waiting for something to happen. The courtiers around you fidget, their eyes glancing nervously at the door, wondering if today's meeting will be any different. But you already know, this is Nzinga's stage, and time is her leading actor. When she finally steps into the room, the atmosphere shifts like a ripple across the surface of still water. Her entrance is never rushed. Every step she takes is deliberate, heavy with purpose. She isn't just entering a room. She's marking the space as hers. And as she moves, you can't help but feel the shift in power. You notice it in the subtle discomfort of the Portuguese officials who've been waiting for hours, their faces strained with frustration. Her lateness isn't a flaw, it's a strategy designed to keep them off balance, to force them to negotiate on her terms. You realize now that every time she's late, it's not just about timing. It's about controlling the pace of events, shifting the mental and emotional landscape of those she deals with. For Nzinga, there is no hurry. She's in no rush to meet the demands of outsiders. In fact, the more she makes them wait, the more she reinforces her dominance. You remember an earlier meeting, one where the Portuguese tried to use diplomacy as a way to coax her into submission. They were early, prepared, eager to discuss the terms of a treaty, hoping to extract concessions from a weakened Angola. But Nzinga's absence that day wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a declaration that she would not be dictated to. Historians still debate the true meaning behind these long delays. Some argue that Nzinga's constant lateness was simply a matter of pride, a way to flaunt her royal status and show the Portuguese that they were not in charge. Others suggest a more calculated reason, that she used these delays to psychologically unnerve her enemies, keeping them on edge, making them second guess their plans and their perception of her power. But here's the real genius of her approach. It wasn't just the Portuguese envoys she kept waiting. It was everyone. She made each one of her visitors feel as if they were part of a grand performance. Their patience was the price they paid for gaining access to her, for earning her attention, and with each passing minute, she had them where she wanted them, waiting, wondering, speculating. What would she say? What would she demand? Could they even trust the deal they were about to sign? You observe the subtle psychological manipulation at play. When she finally arrives, always a little later than expected, the tension is palpable. Her enemies are on edge, already questioning whether they've made the right move by seeking her audience. She knows this. She thrives in this space of discomfort. And then there's the matter of how she delivers her words. When she speaks, it's slow, measured, deliberate, as if she's giving each syllable the weight it deserves. She doesn't rush through her points, and she certainly doesn't give away any more than necessary. She makes the Portuguese work for every concession. She draws them out, forcing them to reveal their hand first. And all the while, she remains poised and unmoving, a queen in total control. You can't help but wonder how many of her tactics were taught to her by those who came before her. Perhaps other women of power who understood that in the world of diplomacy, silence could be more powerful than words. Nzinga's ability to make others wait wasn't just about waiting for the clock to tick. It was about creating a psychological space where her power was unquestioned. Historians have often written about her intelligence and ruthlessness, but the psychological warfare she waged through her strategic use of time is rarely given the attention it deserves. She didn't just win by force or clever negotiation. She won by understanding the human mind, by manipulating the very act of waiting. And it worked. Each time she delayed her meetings, her power grew. You can see it in the way the Portuguese, once so eager to impose their will, are now desperate for any sign of her attention. They're no longer the conquerors. They're the ones begging for a seat at her table. The longer they wait, the more they realize that this isn't just a woman. They're dealing with a force of nature. Nzinga's mastery of timing wasn't just about her appearance. It was about making others question their own desires and intentions. By controlling time, she controlled the flow of power. She controlled the narrative. And when the Portuguese were forced to wait, they weren't just waiting for her. They were waiting for the next move in a game that they hadn't yet figured out. The psychological weight of those delays was profound. Every minute that ticked by raised the stakes, turned the tension into something almost tangible. And you realize, with a sudden clarity, that it wasn't just her actions that terrified the Portuguese. It was the anticipation of them. She created a world where every minute they spent waiting became a minute they weren't in control. In this moment, you understand fully. Nzinga wasn't just late. She was orchestrating a symphony of power, one slow note at a time. And every moment she kept them waiting was another note in her composition, making her enemies squirm just a little bit more with each passing second. You're still in the royal court, a step further into Nzinga's world. The sun is setting now, casting long shadows across the courtyard, and once again, the room is filled with the rustling of courtiers and the murmurs of visitors. Today, the tension is more palpable than usual. Nzinga's lateness seems to be longer than ever, and the discomfort is spreading. The Portuguese delegation looks like they might break any second now. The air is heavy, their eyes flicking to the door every few moments. You can feel their growing anxiety. Nzinga, however, remains untouched. You get the sense that she knows this, that she knows exactly how each second spent waiting twists her adversary's nerves. And as you sit and wait with the others, it becomes clear that she has made this delay, this extended period of uncomfortable silence, into an art form. The clock ticks on. You begin to wonder, how does this timing really work for her? You've seen her entrance, the purposeful slowness, the way she lets the world turn its wheels in an almost suspended state of anticipation. But now you start to think about the role that time itself plays in the larger context of her power. Here's where things get even more fascinating. Nzinga's royal court isn't isn't just about politics and negotiation. It's about cultural customs and expectations. In Angola, time was not measured the same way as in Europe. The concept of punctuality was less rigid, especially among indigenous groups. Time, for many African societies, was something fluid, less bound to mechanical clocks, and more intertwined with nature and rituals. Historians often point out that the European obsession with exact hours and schedules was foreign to Nzinga's people. So, in a way, by being late, she wasn't just asserting personal authority, she was reasserting the power of an indigenous worldview that rejected colonial norms. It's clear now that Nzinga wasn't merely playing by the colonizers' rules of time, she was flipping them on their heads. Where the Portuguese saw the punctuality of a meeting as a sign of control, Nzinga saw the deliberate disruption of that order as a tool for war, diplomacy, and dominance. You can hear whispers in the room. Some of the foreign diplomats are still trying to puzzle out what's happening. They don't seem to understand her game. Some of them are undoubtedly angry, their pride wounded by what they consider disrespect. Yet others, especially those familiar with indigenous cultures, are starting to catch on. They understand that this is a deep power play, a move that goes beyond simple spite or stubbornness. And then, finally, Nzinga arrives. When she walks in this time, there's no dramatic throne-carried entrance, no show of force, but the silence of her entry is just as heavy. She doesn't rush. She glances at the gathered officials, her gaze slow and deliberate. The energy shifts. This is no longer about the formalities of business. This is about understanding the unspoken rules of engagement. Nzinga takes her seat, her back straight, her posture regal. She doesn't immediately speak. She looks over the faces in the room, as if taking measure of each one. And then, when she does finally speak, her voice is calm and controlled, each word metered out with precision. It's clear that this isn't just about the political negotiations. This is about asserting her dominance over how time and how people should move when she dictates the rhythm. Her words drip with intentionality. She begins by asking the Portuguese delegation to recount their journey, how long it took to reach her, what obstacles they encountered, the delays they endured. They speak in measured tones, trying not to sound too impatient, but there's no escaping it. They've been played. Historians still argue over the psychological impact of these prolonged waits. Some suggest that Nzinga's methods were an extension of African conceptions of time as less linear, more focused on cycles and the ebb and flow of natural events. In contrast, Portuguese officials, who were steeped in the European fixation on punctuality and order, would have been profoundly unsettled by Nzinga's manipulation of their schedules. It's also worth noting that by forcing them to wait, she was testing their resolve and commitment. In fact, it's not just the Portuguese she's testing. Nzinga uses her delays to maintain control over all her interactions. She's not just forcing people to wait, she's forcing them to reevaluate their own expectations of power. Every minute they spend waiting is a minute where she asserts control over not only the meeting, but the negotiation itself. This goes beyond simple power dynamics. You're starting to see how time, culture, and psychology intertwine in Nzinga's strategy. When she makes people wait, it's not just a means of showing dominance. It's about shaping how they think about her power. By controlling their access to her, she forces them to acknowledge her authority in ways that are impossible to ignore. The clock isn't just ticking, it's part of her negotiation process. The longer they wait, the more her authority solidifies. Nzinga has crafted a ritual that's as effective as any military tactic. The silence, the discomfort, the growing uncertainty, all of it builds up over time, and when she finally speaks, it carries an undeniable weight. No one, least of all the Portuguese, can deny that she's the one holding the reins. In the world of diplomacy, control over time is an incredible asset. By making her visitors wait, Nzinga doesn't just make them nervous. She rewires their perceptions. She forces them to confront the fact that they can't rush her. They can't impose their will on her. And that, in itself, is a declaration of power. You're beginning to understand. This isn't just strategy. It's her way of shifting the axis of every interaction. Nzinga's lateness, then, is more than just a tactic. It's a mirror reflecting the fragility of colonial expectations. And as you watch the Portuguese strain against her delays, you can't help but admire the way she wields time like a blade, cutting through the assumptions of power that her enemies hold dear. The days stretch on, and with each encounter, you begin to see more clearly the web that Nzinga weaves with her calculated manipulation of time. You find yourself sitting in the grand hall of her palace once more, eyes scanning the court. There's a buzz of excitement today. A visitor has arrived from a distant tribe with news of Portuguese forces on the move. There's no more waiting for this one. Everyone seems to be on edge, expecting an immediate response. But as always, Nzinga has other plans. You can feel it before she even enters. There's a rhythm to the way the court shifts when she's about to make her grand entrance. The rustling dies down, and the air feels charged with anticipation. The Portuguese envoys have already been pacing the hall for what seems like an eternity, their frustration starting to bubble to the surface. And then, just like that, she walks in. Nzinga's steps are slow, measured, calculated. You notice that today the guards around her are positioned differently. The usual rows of soldiers flanking her aren't as prominent. Instead, there's a more intimate circle surrounding her, as if they too understand the power of time in this space. When she finally takes her seat, unhurried as ever, she glances around the room. She makes eye contact with each of the key figures, but it's not a glance that demands respect. It's one that commands silence. She doesn't need to say a word to make her presence felt. She's already taken control of the space, and the room knows it. The Portuguese representatives, as usual, shift uncomfortably in their seats. You can almost see the tension radiating from them. They want action. They want a response. But today, there's a subtle shift. You realize now that Nzinga isn't just late for the sake of power. She's late to control their very sense of urgency. She is teaching them to question their own expectations, to question their assumptions about what power looks like. In the moments that follow, you watch as she listens. No interruptions, no immediate comments. The foreign visitors speak, some nervously, others with feigned confidence. They try to keep their composure, but you can see the strain in their eyes. They're not just waiting for her reply, they're waiting for her reaction. Singa's lateness isn't just about her. It's a masterclass in the psychology of control. By making others wait, she forces them to rethink their own positions, to question whether they're truly in a position of power, or whether they're merely pawns in her larger game. Historians have long debated the effectiveness of this approach. Some suggest that Nzinga's use of time was a natural extension of her formidable political instincts, and that by delaying, she forced her enemies into positions where they were less likely to act rashly. Others argue that her lateness reflected a deeper understanding of the psychology of power, that she knew her enemies needed her more than she needed them. By controlling when she responded, she forced them to confront their own impatience and desire for resolution. What's becoming clearer now is the long-term effect of her strategy. It's not just the immediate discomfort that her delays cause, although that, in itself, is powerful enough. It's the lasting impression they leave. The more her enemies wait, the more they grow dependent on her decisions. Her timing isn't just about the moment at hand. It's about setting the terms for every interaction that follows. And as you sit there in the court, you begin to see the full scope of her influence. The longer her enemies wait, the more they realize they're playing by her rules, not theirs. You can see it in their eyes, the dawning realization that they're not in control, that they can't rush her. Every second they spend waiting chips away at their confidence, making them more vulnerable to her influence. As bent as it turns out, is the one thing that they cannot bend. Now, you start to understand how Nzinga's control of time is more than just a psychological trick. It's a weapon, and like any weapon, it has long-lasting effects. You're witnessing it in real time. By making others wait, she's establishing a kind of dominance that isn't easily shaken. The Portuguese can send emissaries. They can march their troops across the plains, but they can't dictate when Nzinga will act. And this weapon extends beyond her dealings with the Portuguese. You see it now in her relationships with local leaders, those who may have once been her allies, but now stand at odds with her. Each of them has felt the bite of her delays, the sting of being forced to play by her timeline. You can see that it's more than just about diplomatic meetings. It's about territory. Every moment that ticks by, every instance when Nzinga makes someone wait, shifts the balance of power. Time is territory, and she's taking it, 1 minute at a time. But there's an even deeper layer to all of this. Nzinga's manipulation of time isn't just about controlling those around her. It's about waiting for the right moment. And that moment never seems to come early, whether it's in military strategy, political maneuvering, or even personal interactions. Nzinga's ability to control when things happen is unmatched. In battle, for example, she often waited until her enemies had made their move, ensuring that they had stretched their resources thin. Once they had committed to an attack, Nzinga would strike back with precision, using their own impatience against them. You start to see the brilliance of her strategy. It's not just about delaying action. It's about waiting for the right moment to make every move count. Historians continue to discuss Nzinga's military strategy, and while her leadership on the battlefield is well documented, her manipulation of time adds a layer of complexity that has often been overlooked. Her ability to choose when to act, when to move, and when to stay still was as important as any sword or shield. And so, as you sit back in the court today, watching yet another round of negotiations unfold, you understand the full impact of her control over time. It's not just about being late. It's about making sure her enemies never know when their next move will be, when her response will come, or when she will strike next. This isn't just power. It's a revolution of time itself. As the days grow longer, you find yourself more entrenched in Nzinga's world. Each meeting, each tense silence that fills the air, deepens your understanding of the unique power she wields. The more you witness, the clearer it becomes that her lateness isn't a mere quirk. It's a finely tuned ritual, a deliberate act that goes beyond the personal to become a tool of resistance. Today, the Portuguese have sent another emissary, one that seems even more eager than the last. This one, you notice, seems to have studied Nzinga's behavior. He's on edge, trying not to show his nerves, but there's a subtle desperation in the way he keeps glancing at his pocket watch. His movements are quick, like he's aware of every passing second, like he knows he's playing against an invisible clock. But Nzinga, as always, has already set the pace. You begin to notice something new today. Nzinga's lateness isn't just about disrupting the expectations of the Portuguese. It's a deeper challenge to their worldview. The Portuguese were a culture rooted in strict timetables, in calculated precision. In contrast, Nzinga is a product of a culture where time is more fluid, more connected to nature and spiritual rhythms than to the ticking of a clock. She uses this cultural difference to her advantage, creating a space where the rules of colonial order don't apply. As the Portuguese envoy fidgets in his seat, you realize that what Nzinga is doing goes beyond simple defiance. She's disrupting the very notion of what it means to be on time. She's not just rejecting the colonial power of the Portuguese. She's rejecting their entire framework of time and control. Nzinga, you now see, has a deep understanding of the symbolic weight of time. By forcing others to wait, she forces them to recognize her control over the very process of negotiation. The Portuguese might think they're the ones negotiating power over Angola, but Nzinga is showing them that true power doesn't operate by their clock. When she finally arrives, elegant as always, her posture regal, you notice something else. The envoys, who were once so proud of their punctuality, now look uncertain. Their earlier composure has cracked. There's no surprise in Nzinga's entrance. She's already rehearsed this moment, and so have they. But there's something deeper at play here. The longer they wait, the more they begin to question themselves. Were they too eager? Did they make a mistake in assuming that their time was more valuable than hers? It's as if every moment that passes stretches their patience thinner, and with each second, their power slips further away. Nzinga doesn't waste any time once she enters the room, but her first words aren't to the Portuguese. Instead, she turns to her own advisors, quietly speaking to them in her native tongue. You feel the shift. Her eyes are sharp, assessing, as if every movement in the room matters. She knows the game she's playing, and she knows that the more she delays, the more her enemies will question whether they should be the ones negotiating at all. It's clear now. Nzinga isn't just using her lateness to manipulate her immediate surroundings. She's using it to alter the very course of history. By forcing the Portuguese to wait, she's not just demanding respect. She's reclaiming time itself. In the world of European colonizers, time is money, power, and authority. But for Nzinga, time is something she bends to her will. And by doing so, she transforms herself from a mere ruler into something far more potent, an embodiment of resistance. Historians still argue about the deeper cultural implications of Nzinga's use of time. Some say that her delays were a reflection of her unyielding resolve, a conscious refusal to play by the colonial rulebook. Others argue that her lateness was part of a broader strategy to resist not just military conquest, but the very idea of colonial domination itself. By refusing to adhere to the strict schedules imposed by her enemies, she was, in a way, rejecting the entire colonial system. Nzinga's influence wasn't just about military victories or political negotiations. It was about reshaping the terms of engagement. By taking control of when things happened, she became the master of not only the conversation, but the outcome. The Portuguese may have controlled the ships and the weapons, but Nzinga controlled the timeline. And that was something they could never truly understand. Now, as the emissary stumbles through his formal pleasantries, you notice a subtle shift in his tone. He's no longer the calm, assured diplomat he was when he arrived. There's a hint of desperation, a recognition that the game has already changed. And it's clear that Nzinga holds all the cards. There's a reason that historians often highlight her diplomatic brilliance. Nzinga was a master of psychology, not just in battle, but in the art of negotiation. Every delay, every long pause, every moment she made her enemies sweat was a calculated move. She wasn't just keeping them on edge for the sake of amusement. She was making them question their very assumptions about power. She knew that the more they were forced to wait, the less power they would have over her, and the more they would begin to question their own strategies. In this way, her lateness becomes a kind of weapon. It's a weapon that strikes at the heart of colonialism itself. Every second that the Portuguese wait is a second that reasserts Nzinga's power and undermines their authority. And in a world where every moment counts, that's a powerful tool to have at your disposal. As the meeting finally begins, you watch Nzinga's careful deliberation. Her responses come slowly, but they are measured, calculated. She never gives more than she needs to, never reveals too much too soon. In the space between her words, the power dynamics shift once more. Nzinga's timing is flawless, and it's clear now. Her control of time wasn't just about being late. It was about making her enemies feel time, making them experience her power as a force greater than their own. As you settle deeper into the rhythm of Nzinga's court, it becomes even clearer how intricately she controls the atmosphere around her. The air itself seems to bend to her will, heavy with the tension of those who must wait for her decision, wait for her actions. You've watched enough now to understand that her use of time goes beyond strategic diplomacy. It's a powerful psychological game. But today, something shifts. You can feel it. There's an undercurrent of anticipation. Word has spread that Nzinga plans to meet with a new set of Portuguese envoys who have arrived with a different proposition. They come not with threats or demands, but with an offer, something Nzinga hasn't fully revealed yet, at least not to you. You know that when she agrees to a meeting, it will be because she has something to gain. The question now is, what will she ask for in return? As the envoys file into the court, you notice a slight change in their demeanor. They are no longer the same confident men who walked in before. Today, they are more subdued. Perhaps it's the reputation of her delays, or perhaps it's the heavy weight of her power they can feel settling over them, like the heavy heat of midday. They are conscious of every second as they stand at attention, awaiting her arrival, and they are, as usual, not disappointed. You've grown accustomed to her entrances, but today's feels different. The room seems to pulse with her presence even before she enters. And when she finally does, it's as if the entire space pauses. Everything holds its breath. Nzinga moves with deliberate slowness, her gait calm, measured, more controlled than ever. Her eyes flicker toward the Portuguese representatives, and without saying a word, they shift in their seats, uneasy. This time, she does not make them wait long. There's something more calculated about the way she approaches this meeting. She is, perhaps for the first time, ready to deliver. This is not a battle of will, but a game of leverage. You can see her mind at work as she steps forward. There's a subtle shift in the air. The tension is thicker now. You watch her assess the envoys as if they are pieces on a chessboard. She moves closer, takes her seat, and the quiet murmur of whispers settles. No one dares to speak before she does. The meeting, like all the others, begins with her controlling the pace. Nzinga doesn't waste time with pleasantries. She begins by asking the envoys about the offer they've brought with them, and you notice how the room shifts as they begin to speak. Their words tumble out more quickly than they intend. Each time one of them falters, Nzinga pauses just long enough for the silence to make their nerves grow, like a simmering pot on the verge of boiling over. She doesn't rush them. She lets them speak, but only after giving them that time to stew. You see now that her lateness wasn't about holding meetings for the sake of it. It was part of this larger strategy, this art of controlling the space between words, the gaps in conversation that can make people second guess their own statements. Historians argue whether Nzinga ever truly intended to create peace with the Portuguese. Some suggest that her negotiations were never about compromise, but about gaining the upper hand, about using every meeting, every delay, as a way of gaining more ground. The idea of peace with the Portuguese was likely just another opportunity to extend her influence further, to push their expectations until they no longer dared to challenge her. Today's meeting feels like the culmination of that tactic. The envoys, despite their diplomatic training, are on the defensive. They came with an offer, sure, but they did not expect Nzinga to turn the table in this way. You begin to understand the brilliance of her approach. She doesn't have to make grand gestures. She doesn't need to shout or demand. The power is in the stillness, in the control of every moment. You also notice something subtle but telling. There's a slight hesitation in the way the envoys present their offer. They've been waiting for the queen to respond, but she isn't rushing them. She isn't giving them what they expect. And with each passing moment, you can see their resolve weakening. Their proposal begins to feel less like a negotiation and more like a desperate plea for Nzinga's favor. This, you realize, is the true power of Nzinga's lateness. It's not just about keeping others on edge. It's about using that tension to make them offer more than they intend, to make them overextend themselves in a bid to get her attention. Her influence is not just political, it's psychological. And by the time she speaks, you understand that it's all a delicate balance of timing. She speaks slowly, deliberately, allowing the silence to linger before her words land. Her response is calm, but the weight of it is undeniable. Historians debate the impact of Nzinga's psychological warfare in diplomacy, but you can see it for yourself now. Her control over time, her ability to manipulate the moment, is what has made her so powerful. It isn't just about when she acts, but when she doesn't act. It's the moments of silence that have shaped her reputation and, in many ways, her entire legacy. As the meeting progresses, you see how this delay tactic has built her reputation. She doesn't need to act quickly or even decisively. She has created a persona that thrives on uncertainty, on the idea that she will respond only when she deems it necessary. And that in itself has forced her enemies to adapt to her rhythm. In the silence between her responses, the envoys falter. They offer more concessions. They beg for her approval. They aren't just negotiating anymore. They're desperate. And in that desperation, you see the true nature of Nzinga's power. She hasn't just defeated them in battle or outsmarted them in negotiations. She's made them wait. And in making them wait, she's turned the very idea of time into her weapon, bending it to her will in a way that few could even begin to comprehend. The meeting concludes, but the ripple effects of Nzinga's power continue to reverberate through the court. You can feel it in the way the Portuguese emissaries depart, their heads bowed, their steps less certain than when they first entered. The weight of the silence, the subtle pressure of waiting, lingers with them. As they file out, there's a clear sense of defeat, not in terms of battle, but in spirit. The true nature of the negotiation duel wasn't about who held the most land or gold. It was about who controlled the flow of time. The room slowly begins to empty, but Nzinga remains, her eyes sharp as she observes her surroundings. The deliberation, the calculation, it's all there. As always, her control over the tempo of the interaction has tilted the power dynamics in her favor. The Portuguese may have thought they were negotiating a treaty, but what they were really engaging with was a force much more elusive, Nzinga's timing. It's almost difficult to grasp the full magnitude of her approach. It's not just that she was late, it's that she held power over the very act of waiting, forcing her adversaries to confront their own impatience, uncertainty, and fears. Each moment of silence is a moment they can't reclaim, and Nzinga knows that better than anyone. She has made time her ally, twisting it into a tool for control. Historians still struggle to fully comprehend the extent of Nzinga's strategic genius. While most accounts of her reign focus on her military prowess or her defiance of the Portuguese colonial powers, there's a quiet brilliance in her manipulation of time itself. There's no denying that time was one of her greatest weapons. She didn't just use it to bide her own space. She used it to make her enemies bend to her will. By forcing them to wait, by making them uncertain, she rendered them weaker. And in that weakness, her own power grew. As you reflect on the events that have just unfolded, you can see now how Nzinga's timing shaped everything. In her world, there was no rush to action. Every decision was deliberate, measured, and carefully timed. She never allowed herself to be hurried, and by doing so, she rendered her enemies powerless in their haste. It's almost like a dance, an intricate choreography where she leads and they follow, unsure of the next move. But this wasn't just about psychology or diplomacy. Nzinga's use of time had real-world consequences. The Portuguese envoys might leave defeated, but they would not forget their lesson. They would return to their superiors with stories of a queen who didn't just control her own kingdom, but controlled the very pace of time itself. And this understanding of power extended beyond the Portuguese. Local leaders, those who may have once been skeptical of her, now see her as a force to be reckoned with. Her ability to delay, to stretch time until it became a weapon in its own right, spreads like wildfire across the land. You see it in the way others begin to treat their interactions with her, carefully, cautiously, always wondering what the queen will do next. Nzinga's reputation grows in ways no army could ever achieve. Her control over time has transformed her into an almost mythical figure, a queen who doesn't just fight for her land, she redefines the battlefield. Her very presence bends the rules of engagement, and it's clear now that the Portuguese have learned something invaluable. Their empire may be vast, but time is a currency they cannot buy. You can't help but be drawn deeper into her world, where time is more valuable than gold, more sacred than treaties. The longer you stay, the more you begin to see it. Nzinga's approach wasn't just about getting what she wanted in a single meeting. It was about making everyone who interacted with her rethink their entire approach to power, to diplomacy, to the very passage of time. By controlling when things happened, when they were said, when they were done, Nzinga manipulated the entire flow of history. She reshaped the contours of colonialism in a way that still confounds scholars. Historians still debate whether her delays were merely a reflection of personal pride or whether they were an intentional, deeply rooted strategy. But one thing is certain. She used time as a weapon in ways no one before her had ever considered. You begin to realize that Nzinga's power isn't about just one moment, one meeting, or one battle. It's about the accumulation of all those moments. The longer you wait for something, the more you value it. The longer your patience is tested, the more significant the reward seems when it finally arrives. Nzinga understood this at a fundamental level. Her delays weren't mistakes. They were choices. Choices that gradually wore down her enemies and amplified her strength. Every instance of waiting, every prolonged moment before a decision built her legend. She knew the value of silence, the power of the pause. While the world outside her court rushed forward, she controlled when things moved and when they didn't. And by doing so, she reasserted her dominance. And as you sit in the quiet aftermath of yet another tense meeting, you understand. Nzinga's lateness wasn't about disrespect. It wasn't about defiance for the sake of defiance. It was a carefully crafted strategy, one that left her enemies questioning their own place in the world. It was her ultimate form of power, a power that didn't need to shout, didn't need to demand, but quietly, methodically controlled. Historians still argue over the effectiveness of her tactics, but you've seen it for yourself now. It wasn't just about how long she made them wait. It was about why she made them wait. By doing so, she shifted the balance of power. She didn't just win battles. She made time itself her ally. Nzinga's power, honed through strategic delays and a masterful manipulation of time, has now become the stuff of legend. You've watched her move through the court, each moment weighted with purpose. It isn't just her political savvy or military acumen that makes her formidable. It's her understanding of time's role in shaping perception and power. Today, as word of her triumphs spreads across the land, you find yourself contemplating the long-term effects of her methods. The Portuguese envoys, once so confident in their colonial authority, Now treat every interaction with Nzinga with utmost caution. They've learned that she doesn't just play by her rules. She redefines the game entirely. It's hard to ignore the subtle changes in the air when Nzinga enters the room. There's no rush, no urgency in her movements. When she speaks, it's not just to convey information, it's to control the rhythm of the conversation. The people around her have learned by now that nothing will be done until she decides it's time. Her presence in a room demands patience, and it requires every person in it to adjust to her pace. And it's not just the Portuguese who've been affected. Local leaders, once hesitant to engage with Nzinga on her terms, now wait with bated breath when she enters a room. They understand the unspoken rule. In her presence, time belongs to her. Even the greatest warriors, those who have fought alongside her in the heat of battle, pause when she speaks. They know that in her silence, in her pauses, she is recalibrating the balance of power. Nzinga has taught them all that waiting isn't weakness. It's a tool, a weapon. It's one that she wields with such skill that even the most seasoned diplomats can't quite keep pace. Her ability to control time, to make people wait, to stretch their patience to its limit, has made her a formidable opponent in every way. It's a tactic that has earned her not just respect, but fear. And it's a fear that lingers long after the meetings have ended. You reflect on the consequences of this fear. Time, once seen as a simple measurement of moments, has become the very thing that shapes the course of events in Angola. The Portuguese might have come here with their timetables, their expectations of control, but Nzinga has turned that structure on its head. She has shown that by controlling the flow of time, she controls the outcome. Her enemies may come prepared for negotiations, but they are never prepared for the waiting. The concept of time in colonial dealings has been irrevocably altered. In the face of Nzinga's power, there is no predictability, no sense of control. When will she answer? When will she act? No one knows. And it's this uncertainty that unsettles everyone, from the smallest tribal leader to the most powerful European envoy. No one can rush Nzinga. No one can impose their timeline on her. And this uncertainty, this waiting, becomes her most powerful form of defense. But Nzinga's use of time wasn't limited to diplomatic negotiations. In her military strategy, time played an equally important role. As the Portuguese advanced, thinking they had her cornered, Nzinga waited. She allowed them to extend themselves, to believe that they had the upper hand, and when the moment was right, she struck back with precision. She knew that by allowing the Portuguese to overextend, to act on their assumptions, she could defeat them more easily. Her use of time in these situations wasn't about immediate action. It was about knowing when not to act. Nzinga understood that victory wasn't just about pushing forward. It was about knowing when to wait, when to let the enemy tire themselves out, when to let them play into her hands. And time, in this context, was as much a part of the battlefield as any weapon. Her enemies might have been quick to advance, but they were playing a game they didn't understand. They thought they had time on their side, but Nzinga had a different perspective. She knew that time, like power, could be wielded with deadly precision. You begin to see how deeply Nzinga's understanding of time runs. For her, it's not just a tool, it's a weapon. By making others wait, she disorients them, disrupts their rhythm, and forces them to rethink their strategies. By controlling the moment, she controls the outcome. Her delays are never random. They are calculated moves in a grand game of power and influence. The Portuguese envoys may have been caught off guard by her silence, but you now realize that Nzinga's silence is her most potent weapon. In her silence, she forces others to fill the void, to make mistakes, to misstep. And when they do, she is ready to pounce. Time is never wasted for Nzinga. It is always part of the plan. It's no wonder that her reputation has spread far beyond Angola. The stories of a queen who made her enemies wait, who turned time itself into a weapon, have traveled across continents. The Portuguese may have hoped to tame her, to impose their will on her land, but instead, they've learned an invaluable lesson. They can never control when Nzinga will act. They can never predict the moment when she will make her move. Nzinga's legacy is not just one of military victories or political triumphs. It is one of timing. She has shown the world that the true power lies not in the battles fought, but in the moments between them. The moments of waiting, of silence, of control. It's a lesson that no one who faced her will ever forget. In her world, time is a force, and she is its master. As you move toward the final chapter of Nzinga's story, you begin to understand the true weight of her legacy, her manipulation of time, her ability to stretch moments into weapons, and her uncanny ability to control the rhythm of power have shaped everything. Nzinga's empire wasn't built on mere military might or political alliances. It was built on presence. Her presence was her power, and that power was measured not in the weapons she wielded, but in the spaces she controlled with her silence. As her empire flourished, the Portuguese learned to respect her in ways they had never anticipated. At first, they thought they could overpower her with numbers, with ships, with gunpowder, but they underestimated the power of one thing: waiting. They learned quickly that they were not the masters of time. Nzinga was. Over the years, she has maintained this masterful control. The Portuguese despite their technological advantage, were left disoriented by her unpredictable nature. They could not predict when she would strike, when she would meet, or when she would make her demands. The long pauses, the drawn-out silences, each moment of waiting felt like a heavy shadow, casting doubt and uncertainty upon every move they made. Now, decades into her reign, Nzinga's influence extends far beyond her court. Her understanding of time, her manipulation of the moment, has become something legendary. People from other kingdoms and distant lands have come to study her methods, to learn from the queen who could control not just people, but time itself. Her late arrivals, her silence, and her slow, measured responses have become the stuff of myth. You hear the stories, whispers in the halls of foreign diplomats, murmurs among local leaders. Nzinga has built a reputation that precedes her. To those who understand the game, her delays are not signs of disinterest. They are signs of mastery. To be in her presence is to submit to her rhythm, to dance at the pace she sets. And that pace is one of controlled power, one of careful timing that leaves no room for mistakes. Even as she ages, Nzinga's power only deepens. She has outlasted so many of her adversaries. The Portuguese, once so eager to dominate her, are now wary of even making direct demands. Their envoys know that each meeting with Nzinga is a test of their patience, a test of their ability to endure. And that's where her power truly lies, in her ability to make others endure. Historians have spent centuries studying her reign, trying to understand the full scope of her genius. Some argue that her lateness was simply a reflection of her pride, a royal prerogative exercised to its fullest. But the more you look into it, the more you see that it was never just about pride. Nzinga's late arrivals weren't moments of rudeness. They were strategic. Every second she made her enemies wait was a second they were no longer in control. By holding back, by choosing when to act, she showed that she wasn't bound by the same rules as everyone else. And that's the crux of her legacy. Nzinga controlled time as no one else had. Where her enemies saw delays as weakness, she saw them as opportunities. By making others wait, she disarmed them. By controlling when things happened, she dictated the pace of the world around her. No military force, no colonial empire could ever change that. In the twilight years of her reign, Nzinga's power remains unchallenged. Those who meet with her, those who come to seek her counsel or her favor, know the rules by now. They must wait. They must endure. And in that endurance, they must confront the truth that Nzinga's control is absolute. Even in her final years, as the ravages of time begin to claim her body, Nzinga's mind remains sharp. Her delays once a tool of physical warfare, have become a part of her legend. The Portuguese, the local tribes, and even her closest allies know that when Nzinga chooses to act, she does so on her own time. Her final moments come not in a dramatic battle or a great political showdown. Instead, it's in one of those long, drawn-out silences that have come to define her legacy. As she grows older, her decisions become fewer, her presence even more imposing. When she finally passes, it's not because time has caught up to her. It's because she has lived every moment according to her own pace, her own rhythm. Nzinga's story, the story of a queen who mastered the art of lateness, is not one of mere defiance. It is a story of a woman who understood that true power isn't in action, it's in the decision of when to act, when to speak, and when to remain silent. She knew that time, in all its unpredictable ebb and flow, could be shaped, and in shaping it, she shaped the very course of history. As you sit back and reflect on the journey you've taken through Nzinga's world, you can't help but feel a profound sense of awe. This was a woman who turned time into an art form, and in doing so, she redefined what it meant to be powerful. Not through dominance, not through violence, but through control. Control of the one thing no one can ever fully master: time. Now, as the final curtain falls on this chapter of history, you feel the quiet presence of Nzinga still lingering, timeless and powerful. Her lateness, her pauses, her silences, they echo through the ages, reminding us all that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply wait.